Is that okay?
You're listening to The Voice, 17104.com.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to the Richard James Show on 17104, The Voice.
I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. You know, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah. Ain't no harm to have your mind. My Lord, he said, stay on freedom. You know it ain't no harm to have your mind. Stay on freedom. It ain't no harm to have your mind. My Lord, he said, stay on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 I feel good. I feel like singing. I feel like we've been blessed with another day, and we've been blessed with this journey we call life. Welcome, my friends, associates. Welcome to the Richard James Show. We are blessed to have uh, 17104, The Voice, the station here that's being operated, owned, and carried, by uh, Elder Chris Thomas, and we appreciate what's happening here. Now we're going to expand our show today. We're going to talk about Pan-Africanism. Let's use the term again, Pan-Africanism. What is Pan-Africanism? And we're also going to talk about the Organization of African Unity. And we expanded to call it the Organization of African and African American Unity because we are part of that. Now, Pan Africanism is the philosophy of black nationalism. In other words, it's not the same as white nationalism, which is a racist concept. We're just the opposite. Black nationalism is based on love and construction, building a nation. You see, we had over 300 to 400 years of slavery. We had a whole system of exploitation around the world in which African people and people of color and also some white folks have been stripped of their dignity, stripped of their resources, and we call that colonialism. Well, the opposite of that is for the people who have been exploited to begin to build their own nation, trying to build their nations with better infrastructure, paved highways, uh, sometimes Wall Street kinds of concepts, also electricity, running water, the kind of things that people need that are basic. Now we have two competing philosophies on the globe. One is socialism, and some people call the other extreme of that is communism. And then we have so-called capitalism. Uh, Let me just say this. Let's take a look at America itself to see exactly where we at. Our people say they hate communism, they hate socialism. But our government, which is based on free enterprise and and really some social concept, Let's take a look at what happened during the Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt era. Uh, People were impoverished. There were people who were starving, people who didn't have enough to eat. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt fed the poor. In other words, uh, by doing that, he lifted up agriculture. He was sending cheese, spam, bread, food items to individuals who sorely needed it. As a matter of fact, my family, uh, both of my parents were not fully educated, and we were working to all to survive. We received some of that some of that food, which was very helpful to us. The other thing that Roosevelt did, that was a concept that helped lift us up. Roosevelt built public housing. Now, some of that public housing, and I mentioned it before, was segregated. Matter of fact, all of it was segregated. And that was the sad part of it. Franklin Delano Roosevelt built public housing probably in every corner of most major cities in this country. I came from a little town, I grew up in a little town called Chester, Pennsylvania. And I lived in two public housing projects. One was called the Annex Public Housing Project, and the other one was called the Ruth L. Bennett Home. It was named after a very, very active and wonderful woman called Ruth L. Bennett. Uh, but I grew up in public housing. But then we had McCaffrey Village back in those days, which was white. So we dealt directly with racism, even when they were doing good. But that's also a socialist concept. Something else that he did that would classify as socialism. Social security. Social security. In other words, when people work, money is taken out of their pay and saved, and when they reach retirement, then they have an income until the day they die. Now that's collectivism and socialism taking care of business. Now that's on one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is free enterprise. I believe very strongly in the concept of free enterprise. Matter of fact, right now, I have a business, and thank God for my business because it keeps me alive, keeps this old mind functioning. I sell African art, African clothing, art of all kinds. I sell art that paintings, that kind of thing, statues, carvings, that kind of thing. And I'm happy that I live in America where uh, a not so rich black man like myself can go into business. And some of us don't do that well. I mean, I'm not making no real profit at this point. I'm just enjoying the idea of having my own business. But the thing is that some people go in, and believe it or not, we have created some black billionaires in this country. You hear what I said? There are black business people. And I'm wondering how they do it. And some of these guys come out of the black community with their rap music and what have you, and wind up as billionaires. And some of us do a lot of other things and wind up as billionaires. Oprah Winfrey is someone who I love dearly. Oprah is probably the richest woman that we know of on the planet Earth. She is worth, the last told that I heard was $2.5 billion, and that's more than just cheese and crackers. Now, is there something wrong with it? And Oprah gives back. Don't be angry with Oprah because she's rich and you're not. Hey, I'd enjoy having $1 billion. I'd help people too. She donates millions and millions of dollars to charity, to colleges, and to worthy causes. Oprah Winfrey is a generous individual and a wonderful, and she's not the only black billionaire. I saw a documentary. It was a gentleman, I can't quite think of his name, who was speaking at the graduation at Morehouse College, Morehouse Men, and he offered to pay, and he paid the debt of each member of the graduating class. All those who had student loans, who had money they had to repay for their education, had it repaid by this gentleman, and there's nothing wrong with it. And what I'm saying is, it's not so much the system, it's how it's administered and how it's implemented. And there are some good people in this world. There are people that go over. Alicia Keys is one of my favorite singers. I love her to death. This woman can blow. Woo, she can sing. She and her husband have adopted an African village, and they're working to support and help that village in many ways. Oprah adopted a school, and she is sending students in Africa to school. So there's nothing wrong with making money in an honest way and giving back to others. Okay, that's what she sowed. Yet shall ye also reap, giving back to others. And when we talk about Pan Africanism, I feel one thing that I feel blessed about is that a lot of our brothers and sisters from Africa have come over to the United States to try to make a living, to try to go to school, and try to improve their condition. And we have become very close friends. Uh, my friends and brothers and sisters from Africa. We had a little problem there at the house. I'm gonna tell you about it. Somehow our water wasn't working, and we had some of our friends who were really from African country came over and turned our water on and just fixed us up. And I just love them to death. They treat us like we are nothing less than blood and family. And that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. We've developed many, many friends. We have friends from Nigeria, Europe, Igbo. We have friends from Gambia. We have who are Mandingo. We have friends that are Wolof from the country of Senegal. My daughter married a gentleman from Senegal. Wonderful, wonderful man. Has helped me with my business. It helped us do the things that we need to do here at this house. Beautiful people. It's all about love. And when you're talking about nationhood, it shouldn't be based on hate. It should be based on love and caring about people. Therefore, you got to structure a government. When we say nationhood, like our government, we have the legislative branch, we have the executive branch, uh, and we have the judicial branch. We have three branches of government that function and have their own systems and also interact together. And that's our government. We have a very good government. And we have armed forces. We have a gentleman right now whose name is Austin, who is the Secretary of Defense, and we kind of tickled to death. My original hometown is Thomasville, Georgia, and Austin was born and raised in Thomasville, Georgia, and I'm just tickled to death that he's there. I just love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Matter of fact, I have to tell you this too. I have a cousin, Monica Armstead. Monica Armstead is the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, and she spent years. She's an attorney. She's my cousin, and she spent years doing things that are very positive and helping black farmers. And it's very, very difficult for black farmers to really, really, really survive. Great, 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 great individuals. But one thing I have to say about this country, there are some opportunities. Yeah, there's some scoundrels, and wherever you go, you're going to find some levels or some degree of corruption. But you also have some great people. You have scoundrels in the continent of Africa. And we got to rid ourselves of those folks, or either rid themselves of their uh, uh, corruption and keep on keeping on. But you can't condemn the whole system and condemn everybody because of the problem of a few. Now we're going to look at some of this. We have a video we want you to take a look at. Nubian Queens have put this out. We didn't produce it. Nubian Queens produced this video and discussing the whole issue of Pan Africanism. So let's take a look at it, and then we're going to come back and review it.
Peace and love, family. Welcome to another Read Book Club discussion with your sister, Dr. Ma'at, and your Brother T. Wolo. So, family, tonight we are discussing Chapter 4 of Booker T. Washington and Africa, The Making of a Pan-Africanist by Dr. Tyrene Wright. She will be joining the panel shortly. She told us last week. I don't know if any of you caught the discussion last week, but she said it was a lot to unpack in chapter 4, which it is. And by the way, chapter 4 focuses on Booker T. Washington's relationship and work with African nationalists and Pan Africanists. And it was a lot that she discussed in this particular chapter. By the way, she's backstage. Brother T, go ahead and introduce yourself before I bring Dr. Wright on.
Hello, family. How you doing? My name is Brother T. Been with the Read Book Club for like 3 books strong so far. I look forward to the conversation, and I hope that you enjoy what we're putting out this book season.
T, you gotta tell them about JT Coins now.
All right, guys. My name also go by JT Corn Rings. JT Corn Rings is a channel that I take precious metals, our silver and gold coins, and I turn them into rings that we can wear. I believe this adage that we say in the stacking community: if you don't own it, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. You gotta hold and own your own precious metals. That's one thing about inflation. So what I do in this channel is just show the process of me turning coins into rings. And soon I'll put content on what we can do in order to start collecting for ourselves and also our children.
All right, family. So I'm gonna bring brother. I said brother. I'm gonna bring on Dr. Tyrene Wright. I'm gonna bring her on now, family, so she can introduce herself. And this is the author of the book that we've been reading. This sister has put in a lot of work, family. She's been studying Booker T. Washington for years, okay? And it shows in how thorough her information is, family, in the book. And I've been posting clips, Brother T, on Instagram, and people are like, I got to get the book, Dr. Mott.
Yes,
Where
I
can I get
saw
the
'em.
book? Brother, shout out to Brother Omar Wiley, Africa. He called me on Friday. He said, Doc, you're becoming the conscious Oprah, because when you tell people to go get books, they're running to get the book. So
That's awesome, though.
yeah, and I think it's beautiful to actually have the author. Like this is the first
Yes.
time this has happened, Brother T. Am I correct? Like to have the
Yes.
actual author come on and explain, certain things to us. And so it's just an honor to have her. I'm bringing her in right now. Dr. Wright, you are on the screen and you are live.
Hello, how are you?
Fine,
Hello.
Doc. How about yourself?
I'm well. I'm well. I was looking forward to this.
Awesome.
We were looking forward to having you, and I was so happy that you could, accommodate us. I have another panel discussion at 7 p.m. To
Hmm.
speak about STEM education. And so
Okay.
I said, oh man, I really want to do both. So I was praying that Brother T and that you would be, flexible, enough to have the discussion earlier than planned. Brother T, what you want to
Sure.
say?
I just want to make sure that I say when Dr. Ma'at sent me that message, I said, make sure you talk to Dr. Tyrene
He
Wright
sure did. He
because
sure
she
did.
said she wanted to be on to discuss this chapter. I wanted to make sure that you was able
He
to
sure
give your
did.
Yes,
yes.
yes.
He sure did. He sure did. He said she remember last week she said she's coming on, so make sure you
Right.
talk to her. I said, okay. And as soon as I hung up with you, as soon as you and I stopped texting, I sent her a text message and she's like,
Awesome.
yeah, she's like, I'll be through. No problem. No problem.
Yes.
So peace and love to everyone in the chat. I see brother Shakra King Black is in the building. Ashar Malik is in the building. Sister Crystal Denise is in the building. RBG, Red, Black, and Green, he's in the building. Coke Crow is in the building. Peace and blessings to all of you. Peace and blessings to all of you, Black African power. All right, so Doc, I want to start this off. I usually throw it to T, but I really want to start this off with a clear definition of Pan-Africanist, because in this chapter, I mean, you've been arguing throughout the book that Booker T. Washington should be mentioned, amongst, the Pan-Africanists that we hold in high regard. But in this particular chapter, you really hone in on his relationships and his work with African nationalists and Pan-Africanists. So before we even start, because it may be someone who's like Pan-Africanist, what are they talking about? Could you give us a definition on what is a Pan-Africanist? What is an African nationalist?
Well, first, so thank you. One, thank you for having me. And you're right. Omawali Africa is right. You're becoming the Oprah of our community and our time. So thank you for having me. Thank you, Brother T, also for having me. And thank you, Dr. Mai, for even undertaking doing this, right? Because this is, this book is not not reasonable challenge, but there's people who challenge, like, you're doing that. Right. So first, so thank you both. Pan-Africanism. So I start, actually, the first time I give a definition of first time I give a definition of Pan-Africanism is in chapter 2. And I basically use the bare bones definition that is involved in the first Pan-African conference. And it emerges as just the unity of African people for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation. That's bare bones, right? Bare bones definition. Us coming together to address exploitation and oppression of our people wherever we are. Okay? And so I'm drawing from the historical definition. But then, as you can see in that same chapter, I go into the form of Pan-Africanism that Garvey and Du Bois will express. And at the core of all of those is the unity of African and Black people for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation, essentially addressing our condition. Pan-Africanism, and then I go on to tell you that there will be other people who are Pan-Africanists who will add other layers onto the concept of Pan-Africanism. Like, for example, Nkrumah, right? You will say the unity of African people are essentially for the purpose of Pan-Africanism is the unification of African people under scientific socialism. That's his expression of Pan-Africanism. So what I do in terms of giving an understanding of Pan-Africanism is get to the core and bare bones definition. And that is unity for the purpose of eradicating oppression or exploitation of African people, but in a measurable way. In other words, it's an activity. Pan-Africanism is an action, it's a verb. A Pan-Africanist would be the individual who engages in the action, right? But across the board, the concept should be that whatever what we're doing is addressing our condition of exploitation and oppression, right? This is why right now we have a lot of conversations going on, particularly because of ADOS and other movements that criticize Pan-Africanism and say that Pan-Africanism hasn't done anything for us. Well, if it hasn't done anything for us, that means it's not Pan-Africanist.
Hold up, Doc. You got to say that again. If it hasn't done, go ahead.
If it hasn't, if us coming together did not produce anything for us, then it is not Pan-Africanist, because Pan-Africanism produces something for us. It actually is to address our very real condition under oppression and as people who are exploited worldwide.
That's right.
So when people are saying, well, Pan-Africanism hasn't done anything for us, and my answer is that, well, then that is not Pan-Africanism, right? I teach an international class with a Black tech company, and I teach people all over the world. At this point, we're thousands upon thousands of people, and we started at the beginning of the pandemic. And I teach a Pan-African history and organizing course, which is an ideological training course for that particular organization that leverages technology to deal with social issues like racism and xenophobia. That being said, one of the things that I work aggressively on is getting them to understand that, you know, Pan-Africanism is about action, and that what we're committed to do, and I bring this from my political background, what we're committed to do is loving our people through action, right? So not just in ringing their declaration or in name only, but in action. And I often give them the example, like, hey, say I have a house party, and if I have a house party or an event and we are all representing various ethnicities in the African family tree, is that Pan-Africanist? No, it's not Pan-Africanist. It's only Pan-Africanist if we come together with the precise purpose of dealing with and coming up with strategies and tactics and actions that address our specific condition.
No,
right?
facts, Doc. And thank you for that. And that's why I titled this show, Is Pan-Africanism Really Did? I know we're going to be focusing on Booker T. Washington, but that's why I titled the discussion, you know, is it really did? I mean, like, because that's what a lot of people say. I get, you know, when I talk about, it was a few days ago, I had a discussion called, entitled, you know, how do you identify and why, right? And so I said, I identify as an African in American, African in America. And I said, and my ideology is Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism. That's my ideology. So people under the comment section, like, why is she talking about Pan-Africanism? Pan-Africanism is dead. ADOS all the way. FBA all the way. And they, you know, so all of that stuff. And so I think though, to be honest with you, Dr. Wright, a lot of those things, a lot of the things that they're saying is dead, because they're not aware of the history of Pan-Africanism, which is what you unpack in this chapter. You talk about the conferences, the congresses. You talk about the African nationalists and what they accomplished, and the Pan-Africanists and what they accomplished. Some of these people, Dr. Wright, that you mentioned in this chapter, I have to be honest, I never heard of them before. You know, I was reading the T. I was looking at the. I said, who is this person from South Africa? You know, who is this person that she mentioned from, I think it was Nigeria or Ghana? I'm like, who is this person? You know, and so I really, to be honest with you, Dr. Wright, I really thank you for that overview that you gave of each person that Booker T. Washington corresponded with. And so, Brother T, go ahead and kick off. I know you're going to read the first page. Kick it off, Brother T, for us.
Oh, I agree with Dr. Wright and also you, Dr. Ma'at. Majority of this information I've never seen, and I'm glad that we're introducing this, number one, because guess what? As we're learning it, we're sharing with our audience as well. And I know that a namesake, what the same surname is, Dubé, I think how you pronounce it, the South African who started the first African school of his life on the continent. I had no idea, and he said in the comments, same last name as myself, is Dubé, brother. It's Dubé. So just giving this information is helping us to learn things and also connect to those also in the chat. What I wanted to focus on is what Dr. Tyrene Wright was stating prior. It was that if it's not working for the African, it's not Pan-Africanist. So I remember on page 71 is when Booker T. Washington made the point to Hunt, who wanted to have students come to I believe to the Sudan to do work, and he stated because of his what he learned, Booker T. Washington learned about colonialism that was happening in that part. He didn't want to send students, if I believe, he didn't want to send students because he didn't want them students to be part of colonialism. So I read here on page 71, it says that Booker T. Washington had laid out his plans to colonize American blacks on the cotton plantation in the Sudan. And Washington wrote Hunt back in January of 1904. And while he was kind, he was very pointed regarding the matter of Negro colonization. Before closing his brief letter to Hunt, he made it clear, as I think I have said to you, I am not in favor of wholesale colonization of the Negro people in Africa or anywhere else. And I think that lays point to what you were stating. If it's not for the African, it's not Pan-African. So he understood even back then. This is not if you're what you're trying to do with the students in Africa, it's not helping us, then don't include it in the plan. So I think that goes to the point what Dr. Wright was stating.
And peace to brother Sincere Love to God. Family, you got to get his album. It's on Tidal. Oh my goodness, he has a song dedicated to Doc. It's called Francis Cress Wilson.
Okay.
Beautiful song, powerful song. So salute to you, Sincere Love to God. He said it has to be a two-way street, and it hasn't. So she is right. It has not been Pan-Africanist because it hasn't been reciprocal and therefore non-productive. And so thank you, brother, for chiming in. But brother T, I wanted to start with the quote. And I know that you mentioned page 71, but I want to start at the very beginning with the quote that Dr. Wright put at the beginning. I felt like it was very powerful. And I highlighted two sentences, actually the last sentence on the first paragraph. But this was a statement she made from Booker T. Washington, a statement that Booker T. Washington actually wrote, I guess in one of his private papers. He said, my interest in the race to which I belong and in the advancement of the cause of humanity, regardless of race, is my excuse for discussing a subject which I have not hitherto called attention to in public print. The oppression of the colored race, and this is what I highlighted, the oppression of the colored race in any one part of the world means sooner or later the oppression of the same race elsewhere. When I read that, I thought about Dr. Martin Luther King, who said that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, something along those lines, right?
Yes.
So essentially, Booker T is saying, look, if you got colored people oppressed in one area of the world, sooner or later it's going to happen in other parts of the world, right?
Right.
So we have to work to eradicate that. And so she goes on to say, and this is Booker T, no one who has followed conditions as they have been developed in what is called the Congo Free State in Africa can fail to reach the conclusion that there is something wrong, a wrong so widespread that civilized nations cannot escape their duty nor evade their responsibility. So she began that quote, and Doc, I know why you did it, because then you move into all of the different endeavors, right? Or his efforts to eradicate oppression. And you started, before you started with that, you started with you started with the Atlanta Compromise. So you started with the Atlanta Compromise, and then you moved into the different, endeavors that he was a part of to eradicate oppression in Africa. But let's move to page 60, Doc, where you talked about that one line that was extremely controversial, right? When he was giving his speech. And you said here, I'm looking for it right now. You talked about one line in the speech. So he says the speech that became known as the Atlanta Compromise established Booker T. Washington as a preeminent African-American leader in the U.S. And it says those who objected to the accommodation of racist social policy saw the speech as a compromise of the worst kind, right? Because based on that speech, we hear he was a sellout, he's accommodationist, he's rolling with the white folks, he's handing us over the white. So you said critics considered it a wholesale endorsement of segregation, a call to forfeit political and civil rights, right? And then you move on to discuss the specific line where Booker T. Washington addresses the audience and he says, in all things purely social, we can be as separate as five fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress. Now, Professor James Small told me on this show, on this platform, that he said a lot of white immigrants or like European immigrants were coming into the country at that particular time. And he said, Booker T was like, wait a minute, you all are looking out for them. But, the Black American, we've been here the whole time. So look, we could be, purely, separate socially, but, we still can, be yet as one hand in all things essential to mutual progress. So is that the context in which he made this statement, Doc?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That it is propagandizing against European immigration. And if you understand, how we right now, there are certain things going on and we may just jump into the conversation, right? Because we all know what's going on, right? What's going on? It's still the pandemic. It's still, just various things going on. And so he didn't feel a need to say, hey, there's some Europeans coming from Europe and they're competing for jobs. Everyone knew what was going on at that time, right? 1895, because there's an influx, Ellis Island, all of that. I actually used to work on European immigration records and archives. And that being said, he is propagandizing against that. However, I'll leave it there. So yes, that's precisely what it is.
Okay. And from that speech, you said a lot of people, that's when people started attacking him. Oh, he's accepting, segregation. Oh, he's a part of the social political. So they started, basically attacking him for that. And then you move on to start talking about, and I thought this was very powerful. I know my mother is in the chat. So Mama, I want you to hear this. In his article, Christianizing Africa. Right. Oh, I thought that was so powerful because it shows that even back then, our ancestors recognized how Christianity was used as a tool to colonize Africa. Yes. And so, he and Booker T. Washington wrote an article. I have to pull this article and read the entire article, Doc. But you mentioned this article that was published in December of 1896. And you talked about how, Booker T. Washington said that, they would send the missionaries over. They would send the missionaries over, send the church over, but they would use religion, and I quote, you said, to mask imperial objectives. Yes. And so you said that, and this is something that we've seen throughout Africa. Here come the missionaries, here comes the church, here comes the Bible. And then before you know it, as Jomo Kenyatta said, he said, man, before they came here, we had the land and they taught us about Jesus, told us get on our knees and pray. And then when we open our eyes, they had the land and then we had the Bible.
Right.
So they came, gave us the Bible, took the land, and then next, we walking around with the Bible while they're colonizing, our land. So Doc, did you want to speak to that?
Yes. I mean, Washington, like of all the things he could have chose to talk about, of course, he's speaking about something that is impacting the African world, right? If you notice too, though, I say where he's at when he writes the first of several articles, he's in Tuskegee, and he decides to write this article about what's happening in the Congo, in a local paper. So he's propagandizing against the atrocities going on in the Congo and in Africa from his base in Tuskegee. And he is, by this point, I think it's a little further, but, it's a little further in. He educates himself, not only on Africa, but African ethnicity, the dynamics of imperialism, how it's moving across the continent. And so he knows that missionary work is right there in the middle under the guises, Christianizing African people, but really with the objective of imperial objectives to take land, essentially. And so this is also why I often say, and I don't think I need to say it, but this is why I often say, he was not extremely religious, because it doesn't mean you're not spiritual. It doesn't mean you don't have a connection with God. It just means that organized Western religion, right? Because we know Christianity begins in Africa and many religions begin in Africa. But once it is the form that is used to colonize us and enslave us, you can see that he has a rejection of it, right? He says in one boat, they go with the rifle and with the Bible, and the other with the gun, right? And so, in other words, using violence to dominate people. And so he's very acutely aware of this. He rejects it. Of all things he could have written about, he wrote about Christianizing Africa. And what does that have to do with? It really is about colonizing Africa, right? More than anything else.
Yeah, it was never about spreading the gospel or spreading the word. It wasn't that. And I saw that firsthand, Doc, when I went over to Elmina, and how literally, Brother T, you had a church that was right across from the male and female dungeons. I mean, how sick is that? Like, literally in Elmina, you had the male dungeon, the female dungeon, and a Portuguese church is sitting in the middle of Elmina. I also saw it when I went to Cape Coast, and they had a church on top of the dungeons, Brother T, on top of the male dungeons in Cape Coast. So it wasn't about, these people in one breath, they talking about God and Jesus, but in the next breath, they're treating human beings like animals, like cattle, like less than human, Yes. And so it was never about, when they introduced us to Christianity, it was never about, trying to spread the word. It was about control. It was about power. It's about colonization and imperialism. Brother T, you wanted to chime in?
I wanted to bring up a term, because when I read this part of the book, I thought about this term I heard years ago called rice Christians. Rice Christians was an expression, it's a term used to describe someone who was formally converted to Christianity for material benefits rather than religious reasons. So it says that they converted because they needed medical supplies, they needed food, they needed shelter, and this was used as a decoy, as Dr. Tyrene Wright placed in this part of the book, is that Booker T was correct. It was because they was gaining grounding and also converting the people for that reason. So it wasn't just say, I'm giving you something that makes you feel good in your salvation. I'm doing this to take over your land and also use you as human resources.
And then she moves the conversation into Booker T, back to Africa. Remember how everybody was saying, we need to go back to Africa? And Booker T Washington was like, wait a minute, I have to weigh the pros and cons of this, right? And what he noticed is that, he said, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to encourage my people who are already under European domination here, right? I'm not going to take them and send them someplace else to be under European domination,
right?
And so he talks to that. So could you speak to that, Dr. Wright?
Yes, and thank you for highlighting that, because if you notice, I include his commentary about his relationship with none other than Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, right?
Yes.
And he begins that particular article where he starts to talk about, of course, because of his relationship and his great respect for Bishop McNeil Turner, that he had to give the option of returning back to the continent of Africa serious thought and consideration. He couldn't dismiss it, right? So that also, too, I think is very important, because if Washington was who one thinks he is, a very American Negro who does not understand his African origins or our African origins, then why does he even consider Africa, right? He's saying, I have to consider it because this is important. Our goal is to be free of oppression, right? So he if I may read just a little bit. He
Oh, please
said,
do.
yeah, he's let's see, his commentary on Africa was not limited to the disturbance of the continent and its people by European imperialists. The social, political, and economic conditions in the U.S. at the time forced Washington to explore a return to Africa by the African American population. In his published letter to the editor of the Washington Colored American, he examined the pros and cons of the Back to Africa movement prior to Marcus Garvey. Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, Alexander Crummell, and Edward Blyden either promoted or returned to Africa. And although a return to Africa was not a personal consideration for Washington, he re-examined it for the masses of African people within the U.S. In 1899, while in London, he wrote to the editor of the Washington Colored American and laid out why a return to Africa was simply not plausible if the desire was to improve the condition of African people. Hence, if the desire, not I'm rejecting it just on the basis of rejecting Africa or anything like that. If the desire is to improve the condition of African people, of Black people, he began by recalling his careful consideration of a mass return to Africa and how he felt about the promoters of the movement. So this is him speaking. I have always had the highest respect for those of our race who, in trying to find a solution for our Southern problem, and he should have said our problem at large, not just the Southern problem, right?
Right.
Advised a return of the race in large measure to Africa. He's saying, I've always had the highest respect for them, right? He explained that due to his respect for people like Bishop Turner and others, and the conditions in the U.S., he had to consider a return and therefore made a careful, unbiased study of the question, right? And ultimately, I mean, you can go on and read the rest, but he ultimately says everywhere, there's almost nowhere the European has not gobbled up. They are all over the continent. It has been infected by them, and those small territories that have not been captured by them are in this unusual category called under their sphere of influence. In other words, it's a soft way of saying that they will engage in force, in my opinion. That's my opinion about what it means. That's my interpretation. Because you're not to the Liberian crisis yet and the African exclusion measure, but there are unclaimed territories, even Liberia in a sense, and they are actively engaging in trying to take land with force. Okay, so that's where my interpretation comes from, even though it's not. I'm aware of that when I'm writing this. So,
No. Thank you.
So that's why. But he's saying there's almost nowhere we can go on the continent of Africa where we would not be under their sphere of influence. And so I guess we better take our chances here.
So, okay. All right. And I know Okunini Kambon would say something different. That brother, you need to get out of America. You know, he called it America. He left his family, his parents, they actually just repatriated. They had a spot down in the South. I don't want to say exactly where, but they had a spot in the South. And I was told that they recently joined him in Ghana.
Okay,
and
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So they just left, and he's like, we gotta get out of America. But Booker T is saying, okay, I mean, if you go over there, just understand that, they're still there. And I saw that firsthand when I went to Cameroon. They're over there speaking French. And I remember being there thinking about Dr. John Henry Clark. Dr. John Henry Clark said, if you show me your religion and your language, I'll show you your conqueror. So I'm over there looking at them. They're speaking French. So throughout, and I see French statues erected. The French control their gas stations there. I mean, it's bananas. So
absolutely.
I mean, we do see it still today. You have the French still there. You have the of course, Britain, of course, England, Britain, they're there. Now China, Brother T, and you were just talking about that before we went live. Now China's gobbling up, Africa and even the Caribbean and places like that. And so, we still witness, what we're witnessing is neocolonization today, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so then you move the conversation into the Togo Cotton Expedition. And this is when you talk about how Booker T. Washington was evolving as a Pan-Africanist, right? You were saying that you see that he was undergoing some sort of transformation, right? Because during the Togo Cotton Expedition, there was some German colonial administrators, right, who reached out to him and said, "Hey, could you send some of your students over here to implement the Tuskegee methods to grow cotton?" And so you're right about, because for me, a Pan-Africanist, I will be questioning Dr. Wright. And you say this in the chapter. You said, well, he did do some things that were contradictory, right? In terms of Pan-Africanism. Because how can you say you're a Pan-Africanist, but you're sending your students to Africa or to a country in Africa, to Togo, to implement your methods to grow cotton for the Germans who are colonizing Togo, right? That's not Pan-Africanism. And so you talked about, that how he did some contradictory things, but then you also said that it was an opportunity for him to get feet on the ground in Africa to see what was going on. And so could you all unpack, I don't know, Brother T, if you want to unpack the Togo expedition or... Oh, he said, go ahead, Dr. Wright.
Okay, so just so you all know, this was the most challenging chapter in the book to write. And let me just give you an overview of, like, just really quick, of how you should view just Washington's story. There's a time where I wouldn't say he's exactly a Pan-Africanist, right? His consciousness develops much like many people's consciousness develop here and now. Unfortunately, right? And I'm open to that because I definitely have had a different path in terms of my life. A lot of the things that I know now, I learned at home, okay, in my formative years. I didn't learn I was an African person when I got to school. I learned that at home. I knew I was African at 6, but that's besides the point. Like, concretely knew I was African, right? So, that being said, most of our encounter with who we are and understanding our relationship to other African people doesn't come until much, much later, okay, in life. What Washington's trajectory is just this. He's always interested because of his mother. He always had a desire. He understood there is in Africa. Those are African people that we came through a journey. He has a desire to engage. I'm sure you saw that already. He always had a desire to engage in Africa in some significant way, he says, right? But he hasn't gone through an education really in terms of what your posture should be. Okay. Even right now, we have an issue. Many of us, and I lived in Senegal. I don't want to blow people up, but there's a lot of us there, and we're playing white, Black people in Africa. That's why some of us go and love it and don't want to come back. Not because we love Africa or African people, because we love, being in a space that we're not in here and playing white to the indigenous African person. I'm just gonna keep it real. So, and as we get to the Liberian crisis, you'll see how that works, and you'll see whose side Washington is on in respect to the Liberian crisis. Because, listen, I give criticism where criticism is due. I don't have any problem with that because that's my job as the historian, the interpreter of the history, right? So I'm laying out the facts, but I'm definitely not afraid to give you interpretation, meaning that where he's wrong, where he's right, and where we are wrong, collectively, we're wrong, and when we right, we right. What happens in the context of the Liberian crisis is you see us, have this desire to leave America because of the oppression and then go to Liberia and set up a system that discriminates against the indigenous African person that's never been displaced. Okay. And why? On what basis? Except for that we are coming from the United States. And so this the whole America
Okay.
dilemma and issue. And it
Okay.
goes on for decades. We are
We are listening to we have listened to some experts on Pan Africanism, given their perception of Pan Africanism. Some of the individuals that they raised up uh, who were interested uh, in Pan Africanism, who were Pan Africanists, was a gentleman by the name of Marcus Garvey. Uh, and there was also a president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, who instituted the Emancipation Proclamation and was a part of the colonial society. What is the colonial society? The colonial society said that they wanted to give Africans the uh, option of returning home to Africa, and they did that. They sent 13,000 people of color, Africans, back to Africa. They went back home. But when you have this country send people back, and they went to Liberia, and they also went some to Sierra Leone, uh, don't expect them not to want to get something out of it. So they didn't send the Liberians back to set up an independent nation that's totally independent of this country. You know that wasn't the case. They sent them back, Africans, African Americans, that is, were former slaves, to set up a government, and there would be linkages between that government and the United States. So many of the indigenous people, when you say indigenous, we say the people that never left. But I'm not going to whitewash them in because there were Africans that helped support the institution of slavery, and that's a fact. So I think that what we need to do is to move forward instead of looking backwards. Because if we look backwards, there's enough guilt to spread around for everybody. So African Americans came over, and helped to construct a new nation, a renewed nation on the continent of Africa called Liberia. And they had several wars. They fought among themselves. It was an awful kind of thing. I think they settled down, but you'll still find African Americans within the government of Liberia whose ancestry were once slaves in this country and returned home. I don't think there's a thing wrong with going home. I think it's a good idea. I have good African friends who left countries, Senegal, Gambia, the Cameroons, left countries to get their education, uh, to try to improve their condition, and then return home and took with them some of the resources that they gained in this country, and they're rebuilding their homes, and then one day they're going back. And the countries are doing well. Yeah, yes, there's still relationships with these colonial powers. And when you say they speak French, if they were colonized by the French for maybe 300 years, of course they speak French. But they also speak Mandingo, the Fulanis. They speak their own language also. Yes, there are links, and there are industries in there that are French owned. Same way in Johannesburg, South Africa. The African indigenous people fought under the leadership of Nelson Mandela and others, Steve Biko and others, and were able to gain political power. Now, we still have whites that remain in Johannesburg and other parts of South Africa and constructed business and still have a lot to say about the economy of those countries. It doesn't happen overnight. And instead of fretting and crying and woe is me, uh, work, lift yourself up, gain the skills, get the education, okay? Develop your economy. Take from the folks that have as much as you can, learn from them as much as you can, and go ahead and reconstruct your economy. Other thing is support each other. That's what African unity is all about. Instead of going to China for that loan, go to Nigeria. Nigeria has the fifth largest economy. Help each other. To me, that's the concept of Pan Africanism. Countries interact with each other instead of fighting each other and trying to be more powerful than the others. Try to build your inner core, your structure to build your own nation. That's what nationhood is all about. Nationhood is not about ethnic groups hating ethnic groups. It's about building a nation. What does a nation need? A judiciary, an executive branch. Okay? A nation needs to have an infrastructure that is working for its people. And I praise individuals to have the intelligence to get the resources they need, bring them home, and do it to death. We have some individuals that are building manufacturing plants in Africa who got the knowledge in this country, building their own cars, paving their own roads, building their own boats, having their own airline, things like that, step by step. You're not just going to jump across the line and everything is going to be all right. You got to work toward it and build toward it. That's Pan Africanism. And it's not about hating anybody, it's about loving yourself and loving other people, building your and using your basic skills. And you have those skills. Some of the most brilliant people that I have met are from the continent of Africa. Most brilliant, closest friends and relatives are from the continent of Africa. I want to thank you for tuning in. This is Richard James, and I still believe in free enterprise. I still have my business in Lebanon, Farmers Market at 30 at 85 South 8th Street in the city, downtown city of Lebanon. Come down and we need your support. We need your help. We still have a large amount of things in terms of art and oils and African clothing and a whole litany of drums that are from Ghana and from Senegal. And these pictures will show you the African paradise. Come down and we will treat you like gold because you are gold. And we love you. We love you very much. That's my daughter, wonderful young lady, helps support us and our business. So God bless you all. And thanks, Chris, for your help. Thank you for tuning in. And this is Richard James signing off. Thank you so much, my brother. God bless. And we'll see you again next week. Take care and so long. Hallelujah. Bye bye. I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Thank you again for tuning in to the Richard James Show. Our African and our African American programs are set up to educate you on what's going on in this world. We thank you for taking out the time to listen. Let us hear from you sometime also. So this is your neighbor and your friend signing off. Until I see you again next week and hear from you again next week. So long. God bless.